such a good feeling to be out in the shop. You guys know what I'm talking about. It's so relaxing out here, yet amps me up at the same time. Just feels like this is where I'm supposed to be. So anyways, what we're doing today is we're gonna be working on the CR250 project back here for you guys that haven't seen that bike. And for you guys that are new to the channel, I know there's a lot of people coming on board these days. My name is Niemela. I work on motorcycles for a living. We've got a CR250 project right here. 125 back there, a couple bikes back in the corner. The number one question I get from everyone, what is the origin of your last name? So it's pronounced Niemela. It's from Finland. So my grandparents are from Finland. We're born there, came to the US, and so that's the story behind that. Dang, I didn't realize I had so many zits on my face. Kind of ugly. Should turn the camera around. All right, the first batch of parts we're going to be installing is all these goodies from Boysen. So I hooked up with Boysen. They sent over a bunch of cool stuff for this build. We've got ignition cover, clutch cover, reed cage, and an exhaust port, or exhaust flange they call it. So super excited to bolt all this stuff up. So let's talk a little bit about what a reed cage, or rad valve as some call it, actually does on a two-stroke. So say it's positioned like this on the bike. This is your engine side. Your carburetor's over here. You have air and fuel traveling in. And when they come into the crankcase or come to the engine, these little pedals open right here. They open up, that flows through into the crankcase. And then when your engine's on the downstroke, meaning that air and fuel mixture is traveling into the combustion chamber, these are closed off like they are now. And so this piece right here has a pretty big impact on the performance of your bike. And so what does this particular rad valve do? Well, it's designed to improve the flow and velocity of that air and fuel mixture traveling into the engine. And that obviously increases the horsepower numbers and efficiency of the bike. And then these pedals are designed to last a lot longer and obviously optimized for flow. And when a two-stroke is operating at max RPM, these pedals are operating at hundreds of times per second. So if you have weak pedals like the stock ones most of the time are, those are going to wear out pretty quick and you're going to lose horsepower numbers. Now, I don't mean to turn this into like an advertisement for Boysen, just simply explaining what an aftermarket reed cage or rad valve will do for your bike. And the exhaust flange, this is optimized to improve the pulse energy of the exhaust coming out the engine, which in turn is going to make your throttle response better, as well as bottom end power. And for the ignition cover and clutch cover, those are built to be a little bit stronger than stock, and I think they just look cool. And of course, Boysen sent over gaskets for everything. So pretty much just bolt on and go. Originally, I was gonna use the stock Honda covers that I had Cerakoted black. Compare these side by side. I don't know, what do you guys like better? Leave it down below in the comment section. Enough blabbing, let's get to work. I'm gonna pull off the stock reed cage along with the stock exhaust flange here. Should be a pretty simple task. Then I'm gonna compare them side by side to the Boysen ones. So here's the Boysen rad valve alongside the stock one. Now I wish I knew more about how intake flow and velocity works, but just looking at these side by side, you can see there's quite a big difference here in design. And it's interesting how the stock valve has 8 pedals. They're all individual, and each port that the pedal sits on is individual as well. And you can see these pedals are pretty flimsy, whereas the Boysen has a lot stronger pedals. There's only 4 ports and just one big pedal. So quite a big difference in design. Take a look at all this light coming through the stock pedals. That's pretty crazy. Wow. Let's compare that to, sick lawnmower, dude. Compare that to the Boysen. Kind of hard to tell because this is quite a bit different design. And those pedals are transparent. but I'm gonna guarantee you there's not as much air or light coming through these ones. Now for the exhaust flange, this one looks like it's a little bit taller, not by much. What I noticed is the inside bore is way smoother than the stock one. This one has a nice smooth finish on it. Stock one has that rough cast look to it. You can see it's got that rough cast finish inside of there, and that's definitely going to affect the flow and the pulse pressure or the pulse charge in your exhaust. All right, I'm going to need to find some new bolts for this stuff. I can't believe I was going to use this nasty corroded hardware. Kind of a hardware freak after doing all that zinc plating. So I'm going to be using this bolt kit, and whatever I don't find in there, I'll use the Tusk kind of general bolt kit here. So this is more of a specific kit for a CRF, and they've got a bunch of bike specific hardware in here. So this rad valve just uses the stock intake boot, and like anything with a gasket surface, you want to tighten in a crisscross pattern just so that everything's going together evenly. Yeah, it's nice to get some fresh hardware on there too. Looks a lot better. Now I just got to pop my electron carb back into the intake manifold, and we will be set. I can't wait to pair that rad valve up with the electron carb. It's gonna be really cool to see how they work together. And once I get this thing up and going, I'm gonna trade the Boysen valve out for the stock one and see the difference between the two. Alright, let's find out how good these covers will look on the bike. So since the clutch cable goes beneath the ignition cover on this bike, just feeds through this hole, connects to the lifter arm here, I am going to have to mount up my clutch cable. Got a Motion Pro brand one, and it's always a good idea to lube them up beforehand, even with a new cable. Now in order to get to the clutch cover bolts, this brake pedal is kind of in the way, so what I'm going to do here is push this caliper in. That should do. And then I'll be able to push down the brake pedal all the way. And I'm going to jam something here to hold that brake pedal down. Now you can see we have access to those clutch cover bolts. Alright, let's check out how this cover will go on the bike. Should look pretty sweet. Honestly, I think it's easier just to pull the brake pedal off. It's kind of a hassle getting this clutch cover on with the brake pedal right there. Alright, there we go. So what I'd like to do when you have a cover that has a lot of mounting bolts is get all your bolts in place, make sure that gasket isn't pinched anywhere, and then tighten down all these bolts in a crisscross pattern. That just prevents anything from being warped or that gasket getting destroyed. And then as far as how tight they need to be, these are only 6mm bolts, so the torque spec is maybe only 6 or 7 foot-pounds. I'm not going to use a torque wrench for it, just going to, you could say, use the torque wrench in my arm. Basically going until I strip it and then back it out half a turn. Not really, just, I don't know, you kind of get a feel for it. But I would say it takes about the same amount of force to torque these to 6 foot-pounds as it takes to turn a doorknob. So basically I'm holding the bolt or holding the ratchet like I'm opening a door or a handle. So not much force at all. And then you want to build that pressure back up in your brakes. Just pump the pedal a few times and then you're good to go. Damn, that looks fresh. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comment section. So I've got an extra Boysen exhaust flange here. My buddy Geary, who watches the channel, sent this over, so big thanks to him. But in comparing it to the stock flange, you can see it's a little different shape. This is the 2003 flange. It's got a round port to it. And this is more square shaped. So I did some research, and this is for a 2004 only. And obviously I have a 2003, so this isn't gonna work on there. So if any of you guys have a 2004 CR250 and you want a Boysen exhaust flange, these things are super trick, all CNC aluminum. Write down in the comment section below CR250, and I'm gonna pick one. Whoops, and I'm gonna pick one of you guys and give you this exhaust flange for free. Gonna take a little break from the 250 and work on the car. Just gotta change the oil and fix up a couple things on it. Thought I'd show you guys something pretty cool here. Got this valve. It's got this little lever on it, and you just push it in, twist it down or turn it down, and that's how you drain the oil. Pretty slick setup. Had this thing on here for, I don't know, probably a year and a half, and never had any issues with it. Even with like driving through snow and having the snow pack up underneath the car. So I'll show you exactly how it works. You just push in this little lever and then bring it down. And there we go. I think they call it a Fumoto valve. Man, it sucks working underneath the car during winter. Constantly being dripped on. There's like icicles under here and everything. Looks like it's all finished up draining. Just gonna go ahead, close this thing back up. Make sure it's locked in that little groove. So yeah, those things are pretty slick. Gonna pop on a fresh filter and add some oil. Man, this engine bay is disgusting. I've been kind of neglecting it. So the next thing I need to do is bolt on my mud flaps. So I've been rallying a little bit too hard, and I ripped this mud flap off and then kind of bent the bracket on this one. Now the next thing I'm gonna do is clean up this trunk. So I picked this thing up on Craigslist. Looks like it's been sitting in the garage for a while, and it's got like this rough, gritty finish or texture on the paint. So the reason I'm using a different trunk is because I'll be bolting up an STI wing to this trunk, and I don't want to drill into the factory trunk. So I'm going to use a clay bar to clean up the paint on this one. You probably can't see what I'm talking about with this texture on the paint, but just listen to it. Yeah, it definitely sounds pretty rough. It actually feels like 500 or 600 grit sandpaper. So hopefully that clay bar cleans all that up. Check out how nasty that paint was. This clay bar was white when I started, and now it's got like this orange or brown stuff all over it. So there's still like a yellow, kind of brown haze on the paint here. So I don't think the clay bar is gonna cut it. I'm gonna have to switch to a buffing wheel. Now, I'm definitely no detailing expert, but after a quick buff, this paint is buttery smooth. Got all of that texture off of there. Just need to get my wing in and I can get it bolted up. So I definitely plan on doing more mods to this WRX, so let me know down in the comment section if that's something you want to see on the channel. Hey guys, so it's a few weeks later, just finished up with my very last treatment, and it feels so good to be completely done with treatments and just move on with life. So I filmed a video from the hospital of my last treatment, kind of took you guys through the entire process, and I put that up on the channel a couple weeks ago, so I would recommend you guys go check it out. I think you would find it pretty interesting. So still working through a few health issues, but I think in about 2 to 3 weeks I'll be all good to go and I can just get back to work full time. So with that being said, let's get back to work on the 250 and bolt the pipe up. Got the pipe all mounted up, and man, that looks amazing on there. The fit and finish on the pipe isn't quite up to par though. You can see on this back mount, it's kind of crooked here with the rubber damper. So not quite perfect there, just kind of nitpicking. This lower bracket you can see is not the greatest looking, and also the rubber damper is a little bit cocked to the side on this one as well. Up on the head portion, the springs are pretty stretched out, so these two little tabs aren't quite close enough to the engine. Once again, not a huge issue. The pipe mounted up, it's on there, looks amazing. As far as performance goes, this pipe is supposed to increase the bottom end performance. So of course, once we get the bike up and going, we will delve into that and see how that works. Oh, and one more issue here. You can see the Kickstarter hits the pipe. I might be able to fix this by moving the Kickstarter up a little bit on the splines. I'm gonna give that a shot and see if it fixes it. But the pipe is pretty close to the Kickstarter there. So for you guys that haven't seen this pipe on the channel yet, it is called a DPR cone pipe. So it's all hand built from individual sections of pipe here. You can see all those individual welds, really cool looking. There's only a few companies out there that still make this kind of pipe. For the CR250, there's DPR, which is this one, Scalvini, and there may be a few others, but it was kind of a debate between the DPR and the Scalvini. If I don't like this one, I might just go ahead and buy the Scalvini and see how that one is. But for now, we're gonna rock it with this pipe. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to fix this Kickstarter issue. Moving the Kickstarter up one position puts the armor right in the way of the frame. All right, so up one spot, and you can see it's on the frame now. So obviously that's not gonna work. So I'm really not sure what I'm gonna do about this. Might just have to run it with the Kickstarter hitting the pipe like that. Not too happy with the fit and finish of this pipe, honestly. Not to bash on this pipe too much, but I actually had to clean up the header portion of the pipe with a Dremel to get it to fit onto the flange here. So kind of disappointing as well. The next batch of parts we'll be installing are the radiators and red radiator hoses. These are Mishimoto brand. Excited to try those out. They're pretty good quality. And for radiators, these are just a set of nice stock ones. Gonna check out these hoses real quick. Doesn't seem like they're super stiff like the Chinese ones you get. And from the looks of it, they are multi-layered. So that's a good sign. Shouldn't have any issues with these ones. I figured I should probably bust out some fresh hardware and check out these Bolt aluminum drilled washers. Should look pretty cool on there. Check this out. It's gonna look sweet. Oh yeah. Time to figure out how these radiator hoses mounted up. So let's start with the two that connect the radiators to each other. These ones right here. So this one goes on the bottom here. So we might have to loosen up the radiators to get that one in. And then this one goes up top. So connects to that fitting there, goes across the frame and over to that fitting. And I don't think I have clamps for this one, so I'm gonna have to order some of those up. So this one is pretty straightforward. Just gonna run it through a little gap, and then on this side through that gap as well. And now for this hose, I'm gonna loosen up this side radiator, pull it out a little bit. That way I can get this hose in between the two of them. Got my clamps on here. Hopefully this hose just slips right onto the radiator fitting. There we go. I'm just gonna bring the radiator back over. Actually, now that I think of it, it's gonna be easier to have this radiator loosened up to get the bottom hose on. So I'm gonna pop that one on real quick. And it's this hose right here that goes between the right radiator and the water pump. So that fitting right there connects to the bottom of the right radiator. And I got a little ahead of myself here, got the pipe on. It would have been a lot easier to get this hose on without that pipe in the way, but whatever, we'll still get it. Just gonna feed this hose down behind the pipe and onto the water pump. And when you're putting the hose clamp on, you want to make sure it's in the correct orientation. On some of these hoses, if you put the hose clamp, say that way, it may be hard to get to the head and tighten it down. So for this hose, I am going to put the clamp on this way. That way I can get to the head of the clamp here. So I'm going to try to get the bottom hose on first and just push that hose right up onto the fitting. There we go. And now for the connecting hose. So this connecting hose is being a little bit of a nuisance. So I'm gonna spray some silicone spray on it. I'm using a Maxima SC1. Just gonna hit it with a blast of this stuff and it should slip right on. And the nice thing about the silicone spray is it'll help get the hose on, but it's gonna dry up and it won't leave the hose like slippery. So that way you don't have to worry about it falling off later. See how easy that slipped on? Yeah, that silicone spray is money. Now we've got 3 hoses and a T. These are what connect the radiators to the cylinder head, and they can get kind of confusing. So what I like to do is use a microfiche or just pictures on Google to figure out exactly how these go. So I'm over here at Rocky Mountain and they provide OEM microfiches, basically a parts diagram that show how everything is oriented. So with the radiator setup, we have a hose coming off the right radiator, one off the left, and then one from the head, and they all meet at that T. So in looking at that, we can kind of have an idea how those hoses go. Another thing I'll do is jump over to Google. I just searched up 2003 CR250 engine, and I'll get these pictures that show up and kind of show how the radiator routing is. Kind of get an idea how that goes. So definitely a huge resource. All right, here's the hose that goes from the left radiator over to the T. Just fits in here like this and up to the fitting. And we've got the hose that goes from the right radiator. Just fits up here onto that fitting and down to near where the other hose came out, and that's where the T is going to connect. Now the hose that connects to the cylinder head. So there's a shorter side and a longer side. You want the shorter side facing the head, and that's going to go right onto that one. Man, that's going to go great with that red fathead cylinder head. Looks pretty sweet. And now for this little plastic T section. So that is going to go to the left radiator, to the right one, and then to the head. And make sure you have all the clamps loose when you're putting this T on, because you might have to shift things around to get everything to line up. We're only going to tighten these up snug. You don't want to go too tight and crush that hose. And by snug, I just mean about the same amount of pressure as like turning a doorknob, like I explained earlier. So not really a ton of torque on these clamps. I've got all these hoses tightened up now, and time to pop on the overflow hose. Don't mind that nasty radiator cap. I'm gonna replace that one, and I'm gonna route it down through here and in between the outlets on the bottom of the radiator here. Just gonna keep it away, try to keep it away from the cylinder and the exhaust. That way it doesn't melt on there. And I'm gonna go down by the motor mount. Just kind of tuck it right down here with the frame. And I'm just gonna zip tie it to the frame to hold it into position. And then up here at the fitting, that's a pretty loose fit, so I'm gonna have to throw a clamp on that one as well. All right, I've got the radiators and radiator hoses all finished up, and the last thing we'll be installing today is one of my favorites. It is a Works connection clutch lever and perch. These things are super nice to have. Makes the clutch lever pull that much easier, and it's really important to have that on a two-stroke. So let's get to installing this. So I'm gonna put this lever together on the bench, and then I can slide it onto the handlebars. All right, so I'm gonna pop the lever into the perch, but let me show you something with this lever. So here in the pivot of the lever, it's got 3 separate bearings. You can see down inside there, and that is what makes the clutch pull so dang smooth. These things are definitely a lifesaver on any bike, especially a two-stroke. And as you would expect, any spot that pivots or moves needs to be greased up in order for it to work at its finest. And then also inside the perch, and then I can slide the two together. Also gonna put a little dab on the pivot bolt as well. And this can be a little bit tricky since the tolerances are so tight on these levers. Trying to get this pivot bolt started inside the lever. Looks like we got it going. Yeah, you can definitely say I'm a man that likes his lube. Everything I put together has to have grease or some sort of lubricant in it, that's for sure. And it's especially important on a clutch lever. Definitely gotta have things greased up. Just gonna snug it up, not too tight. Man, that's about as smooth as it gets. Just gotta put together this cable adjuster now. And once again, this is gonna need a little bit of grease here on the knob. It's gonna slide in just like that. And this is gonna pop onto the perch. And with that grease, that is super smooth. Time to slap this whole setup on the bike and hook it up to the cable. Just gonna slide this puppy right onto the handlebars here. Get it tightened down. This boot right here is gonna go over the end of the cable. Sometimes it's a little tricky to get on there. Might have to squirt a little bit of lube on it to fit it over. There we go. Slipped right on. Gonna turn this adjuster all the way in. Gonna line up the gaps. And the cable fits onto the bottom of the lever here. It's a little groove. Slide that through and into the adjuster. We've got quite a bit of free play there. So it looks like we're gonna have to do some adjustment on this cable right over here. Just gonna turn these threads out on the cable, and that will lengthen the cable housing, and in turn, we'll have less free play or kind of slop here on the lever. So what I'm gonna try to do is adjust most of it right here with this adjuster, and then come back over here and do the fine adjustments at the lever. So to explain a little bit more what this cable adjuster does on the lever is when you're out riding and you notice your clutch start to fade a little bit, when you go over a jump or you have like a split second to make an adjustment, you just roll this thing forward like that. Obviously it's not gonna catch on your glove like that, and that will reduce the amount of free play here in the cable and give you your clutch feel back. So I'm gonna set the cable right there, and then I'm gonna make the fine adjustments here at the lever. Hopefully I don't have to go too far out with this cable adjuster. Now as far as clutch cable slack, you want about the width of a quarter here between the perch and the lever. So pull slightly on the cable and then pull the lever and cable apart from each other, and you'll be able to see the amount of slack there, or the amount of gap here. So that should be, like I said, about the width of a quarter or 3 to 4 millimeters. That's the general rule of thumb. You can go looser than that if you prefer. See right here we have about a 1/4 inch, but you definitely don't want to go any tighter than about 2 millimeters there, or else you'll risk frying your clutch. So right there you can see there's very little movement there, and that's gonna burn up the clutch pretty quickly. So with the cable all hooked up and adjusted, I noticed the clutch lever pull was really stiff, and that's usually not characteristic of a works connection lever. So I figured something was up. It should be as light as this pull here on the 125. I have the same lever, just one finger is all it should take. So I started diagnosing what was going on here. So the first thing I did was adjust the cable all the way back in, give us a bunch of slack, and then come down to the engine here, pull the cable off of there. That way it's not engaging with the clutch actually. And now I can test to see if it's in the cable routing or something in the lever or the cable itself. So I'm using the lever up top here, and you can see at the bottom it's moving, and it's just buttery smooth, no issues whatsoever. So that eliminates any problems with the cable routing or issues with the lever. So I'm going to move on to the actual clutch over here. And so I pulled all the springs off. This could be a clutch spring issue or possibly something to do with the push rod going through. So how I'm going to test that is by holding this clutch pressure plate, pulling in the lever, and seeing how the clutch lever feel is. If it's super smooth, then that means everything is good to go all the way up from the lever through the cable to the lifter arm on the other side, and then through the push rod to this side. That means all of that is good, and it's an issue with the clutch springs. So let's go ahead and test that. So I'm gonna hold the pressure plate with one hand and pull in the lever with the other. Yep, that is super smooth as well. So that means everything is good to go, and I'm gonna move on to swapping out the clutch springs with the stock ones. Okay, so I put in the stock clutch springs. So let's go up to the lever and see how this feels. Ooh, not good. That's a 2-finger. One finger ain't gonna do it. Yeah, that's still no better at all. So, you know what I'm kind of thinking is I don't have any gear oil in there, and so obviously nothing's lubed up, and that could possibly be the issue. So I think I'm gonna stop right here, wait till I get gear oil in there, and actually run the bike and see if that improves the clutch pull at all. That's gotta be the issue because I diagnosed everything else, checked through everything else, and everything seems fine. As soon as I put pressure on that pressure plate, it wants to get really stiff. So I'll update you guys once I get oil in there, and we'll see if that fixes the issue. I've got everything with the clutch buttoned back up, and one thing I thought I would show you with this perch that I find pretty cool and something I use quite a bit on my 125 is the lever reach adjustment. It's a little screw down here, the Allen head, and so adjusting that screw changes the distance from the bars to the lever, so you can really fine tune it for how big your hands are or just general preference. So definitely a really cool feature to have. All right, that is gonna wrap up the video. So this time around we got quite a bit done on the bike. Really stoked with how it's coming out. Some things didn't really go quite to plan, but that's just how it goes sometimes. At least we're making progress. Just want to say thank you for watching the video, and for those of you that stuck behind me the last 8 months while I was going through my little journey with cancer, gotta say a big shout out and thank you to you as well. It means the world to have all of your support. So from here on out, look for videos on a lot more consistent basis, hopefully 2 or 3 a week, and spring is right around the corner as well, so hope to be doing some riding too. So if you enjoy the video, make sure you share it with your buddies, and that's really all I ask of you. Oh, and one more thing, I will be at Seattle Supercross this upcoming weekend, March 23rd, so keep an eye out. If you see me out there, come say what's up. I would love to chat with some of you guys. Till next time, keep it prime.